I've been married for a decade. My wife and I fell in love during college, and our relationship was great until recently. We got married at a young age, and it felt like a wonderful love story. We've faced various challenges together, but one thing I've always been sure about is the strength of our connection. However, things are changing rapidly now. In the past year, we've shared some revelations that have seriously affected our relationship. I have a history of childhood offense, if you know what I mean, from multiple individuals at different times, which I kept secret for many years. This led to a lot of repressed pain that hindered my emotional well-being. I began discussing this with my wife about 5 or 6 years ago, and about 11 months ago, I opened up about the rest. I felt deeply ashamed about it and kept it hidden from everyone. Therapy has been incredibly helpful in making me realize that it wasn't my fault, but I regret not seeking therapy sooner. I'm doing my best to heal. What was my fault, however, was keeping my occasional use of X movies a secret, even from my wife. I had unresolved issues related to privacy and trust that I never addressed, and discussing adult content was something I avoided. I was introduced to it at a young age, and at times it became an obsession. It was present during the times I was offended, and while I resisted it, it resurfaced when I felt isolated. Although movies wasn't a frequent topic of conversation between my wife and me, I told a small, foolish lie early in our relationship. If I hadn't told that lie, things might have been different. We could have discussed her feelings about adult content, but it didn't happen. I've always been honest, but in that moment, I felt compelled to lie due to fear of judgment, particularly related to her religious beliefs. Looking back, I wish I hadn't done that, but I can't change the past. This lie resurfaced multiple times, and I struggled to come clean, so I chose to avoid it. I eventually confessed to her because I learned that adult content could be seen as a form of betrayal, and I couldn't continue lying about the initial falsehood. I accepted full responsibility and deeply regret deceiving her. As I shared these revelations with my wife, she confided in me as well. She revealed that she had considered calling off our wedding because she still had feelings for her ex-partner, and I was her second choice. She kept this secret from me for over 10 years. She felt pressured by her mother, who is a Jehovah's Witness, to marry me for religious reasons. I had some knowledge of this at the time, but I didn't realize that her decision to marry me was primarily driven by fear and desperation. This revelation has deeply affected me. We grew closer after these discussions, but things took a turn about 5 to 6 months ago. She expressed the need for space because she was understandably hurt. It wasn't the use of X movies that hurt her the most, but rather my lying and trying to cover up that lie. I gave her some space initially, but that space has grown significantly over time. She has been consistently pushing me away, and I'm getting close to my breaking point. The distance between us keeps increasing, especially now that she's back in college, attending parties and bars, and hardly spending time with me. She prioritizes her education, spending time with friends, and her school clubs over spending time with me, or even trying to communicate in ways that make me feel loved. Meanwhile, I've been working while she's in school, attending school myself, preparing our meals, taking care of our home, and making extra efforts to make her feel loved, using her preferred ways of expressing and receiving love. It feels like a one-sided relationship. I've been incredibly supportive of her, but I don't see the same level of love and support in return. It's draining, especially since she avoids discussing our issues, and I often feel like my concerns are being dismissed. Recently, she told me that she never truly felt in love with me, despite previously saying the opposite. She does love me and thinks I'm an amazing person, but that intense romantic love was missing for her. She also provided more insight into feeling like I was her second choice and the pressures she faced when we were getting married. My heart is broken, and our relationship is currently at its lowest point. Both individual and couples therapy have been suggested to her. She has declined couples therapy but may consider individual therapy. She acknowledges that many of these issues are her own, and she still believes I'm an amazing person despite my mistakes. However, she hasn't been putting in much effort, and she agrees that we both deserve happiness. But our current situation isn't heading in that direction. I'm uncertain about what to do, but divorce seems increasingly likely. I'm not sure why I'm sharing this. Perhaps I'm seeking advice, or just feeling desperate. Edit. She cheated on me and I feel defeated. Update. 1 year later. Finally filed for divorce. It's been nearly a year since the day I found out about the affair, and I've finally taken the step to file for divorce. Before the affair happened, I never would have considered reconciliation, but my perspective shifted after it occurred. I had a deep love for my partner, having essentially grown up with her. The affair, however, left me shattered. When I first discovered it, I was consumed by anger, profound sadness, and more. That initial day was the darkest in my life. I lost control, yelling at her for the first time ever while pacing the room. It was unbelievable. She appeared genuinely sorry, and as I broke down, the person I had loved deeply for the past 12 years sat there in tears. I asked her to end the affair, and eventually she agreed. However, she fell back into it rather quickly within a week or two because she felt I wasn't showing her love or support. We briefly discussed divorce, but continued living together, despite being separated, for the next 6 months or so. I knew the other man was still in the picture. She insists it wasn't a relationship, yet she was planning to move in with him after those 6 months. This doesn't make logical sense. She has since started therapy, where they discussed her self-sabotaging behavior due to her guilt over the mistake she made. She felt the need to accept that mistake as her new life and believed she didn't deserve me. Those 6 months were incredibly tough for me, to the point where even simple tasks like filing for divorce felt incredibly challenging. I know it's not very complicated, but I was under immense stress just trying to stay afloat. After she moved out, she ended things with the other guy. Meanwhile, I spent the year rediscovering happiness and self-love. I've made significant progress and even started dating someone introduced to me by a friend. This new person appreciates and loves me. My ex has been attempting to reconcile for the past month and a half, possibly because she sees me happy with someone else. I still meet with my ex weekly to exchange custody of our dog, and I've been open and honest about my dating life, including my great new girlfriend. She wanted me to find happiness, but she was also hurting. I had been discussing divorce for months and gradually worked on filling out the necessary paperwork. Finally, I took the last step and filed. I don't believe my ex took me seriously before, but now she's in tears, wanting me back. It's been challenging for me because she seems genuinely remorseful, but it's too little, too late. Some may consider it wrong or irrational, but I've maintained compassion for my ex. I'm aware of her problems and challenges, and all I want is to see her find happiness. I couldn't move past her affair and the deep hurt it caused me. When I see her, all I can think about is the other guy. I'm quite proud of my decision to end a marriage that became incredibly toxic. I never wanted things to turn out this way, but she took me for granted and didn't respect my boundaries. I gave her plenty of chances to change, but she didn't. Now the divorce papers are filed and she's practically begging me to reconsider. The situation is truly sad. This weekend was filled with pain, especially when I told my ex that I had filed for divorce. She cried a lot, but I had to prioritize my own well-being. I'm a very empathetic person, and seeing others in pain affects me deeply, so this was incredibly tough for me. Despite all the hardships I've faced in the past year, I feel fortunate to have met someone new who genuinely values and loves me. This person embodies healthy qualities and treats me with respect and compassion. I'm grateful. I deserve happiness, and I may have found it, but I'm taking things slowly. Second story. I'm extremely angry. For the past 5 years, I've only had love with my wife. Initially, I thought I had a bladder infection or UTI, and I didn't take my doctor seriously when they suggested it might be chlamydia. But now, I've received the test results, and they confirmed that I have chlamydia. I decided to start investigating, and it didn't take me long to discover the text messages between my wife and her lover. I suspect she may not even be aware that she has it too. She believes I was working all night, but little does she know that I've already sent all the text messages to her lover's wife via email. I warned her about his affair with an infected woman and advised her to get tested. I'm still figuring out how to handle this, but my wife will soon wake up to my positive test results and evidence of her infidelity. The sun should be rising in the next hour or two, and this may mark the end of our marriage. I'll provide a more detailed update later. I didn't confront her that morning. The lover's wife responded to me, but she hasn't confronted her husband yet either. Right now, I'm focusing on getting my legal matters in order. My previous post received an unexpectedly high level of attention, so I feel like you all deserve an update on the situation. In summary, my wife gave me chlamydia, and I discovered she was having an affair with a coworker, which made me contemplate ending our marriage that same night. Fortunately, my intoxicated mind decided to wait. I reached out to the coworker's wife, providing her with evidence of the affair and informing her that both cheaters likely had chlamydia. I did this because I suspected my wife might be cheating with more than one person. In her text messages, her lover had asked her if he was the only one she was involved with, and she gave an evasive response. Knowing her well, I had a strong hunch that she was involved with someone else. Luckily, the coworker's wife responded the next morning, expressing her belief that her husband might be seeing someone else as well. They were privately separated at the time, and their separation agreement prohibited them from seeing other people. She had her own suspicions and thanked me for reaching out. We agreed that she would not confront her husband until I had secured myself legally in exchange for the evidence I possessed about their affair. She also confirmed that her husband did not have chlamydia, at least not when they were together. I chose not to confront my wife that morning. I pretended that everything was normal while I searched for lawyers and delved deeper into the mystery of the chlamydia situation. I installed a keylogger on my wife's personal computer and quickly gained access to a secret email account. To my surprise, I discovered that my wife was communicating with someone on a hookup website. What shocked me the most was that it solved the mystery, as the man informed her that he had tested positive for chlamydia and that she likely had it too. Even more shocking was that these emails dated back months before I contracted the infection, which meant she knowingly infected me with chlamydia. Disappointed that there was no chlamydia fairy to blame, I hired a lawyer. Things aren't looking good for my soon-to-be ex-wife. The fact that she knowingly infected me greatly interests my lawyer, along with the overwhelming evidence of her infidelity. The house we live in belongs to my parents, and we've maintained separate finances from the beginning. Her chances of getting much, if anything, from me are quite slim. I served her with divorce papers last month. I purchased a security camera on Amazon during this ordeal, claiming I intended to install it over our front door. However, I secretly placed it in the living room the morning I decided to confront her. I followed the advice of one of the top comments on my previous post about how to approach the conversation. While we were having breakfast, I casually asked, "So, I'm curious, does coworker know you infected him with chlamydia as well?" In response, she cried, apologized, tried to claim it was a one-time thing. I reminded her that this was her second affair, attempted to convince me that she loved me, blamed me, yelled at me for not making her feel loved, and so on. I promptly served her with divorce papers and an eviction notice afterward. I'm staying with my parents until she vacates the house in a few weeks, just to be safe. I'm considering whether to press assault charges against her for knowingly infecting me with chlamydia, as my lawyer believes it should be relatively easy to prove with the emails we possess. However, overall, I simply want her out of my life, much like the STD she transmitted to me. Third story. 2 months ago, my wife, who I had been married to for a decade, I'm 35 and she was 34, tragically lost her life in a car accident caused by a drunk driver in broad daylight. I was devastated and couldn't stop crying for 3 days. We had plans to start a family, and I had recently landed a well-paying job a year earlier. Just 2 months before her tragic passing, we had purchased our first home together. It's still hard to believe she's no longer a part of my life. It feels like just yesterday, everything was going well, and we were looking forward to building our family. She seemed content in our marriage and expressed her pride in me. The week following the accident, I received her locked phone. After a week of trying, I managed to unlock it using an obvious code I hadn't thought of earlier. My intention was simply to preserve her memory by keeping photos of us and our moments together. However, as I went through her photos, I noticed some peculiar things. There were pictures of her in a house that I had never seen before, taking suggestive images. As I continued scrolling, I stumbled upon the most heart-wrenching discovery, a picture of her with another man. It was evident that they were in a place that clearly belonged to him, and they were very close. It was clear to me that this was evidence of an affair. What shook me to my core was when the man she had the affair with showed up at her funeral. I felt a sharp pain in my gut when I realized who he was. I decided to read her text messages, and I soon discovered that she was on her way back from his place just 3 hours before the accident. She had texted him saying, "I'm on my way." It hit me that he was the last person to see my wife, not only to see her but also to share an intimate moment with her. If it weren't for him, she might still be with us today. I feel like I'm going through the grieving process of losing a loved one and the heartbreak of a breakup simultaneously. She kept this affair a secret from me, and she'll never know that I found out. In a strange way, it feels like she escaped the pain she put me through, though I fully understand that death is a far greater tragedy. Even with all this knowledge, I would never wish this pain or any suffering upon her. I discovered the truth not only from her text messages, but also from her Facebook messages. What infuriates me is that she confided in her closest friend about a guy from work wanting to take her out to dinner, and her friend actually encouraged her to go. This infuriates me because I knew her friend and she always seemed nice in person. But my wife sought confirmation, hoping her friend would say, "No, you're married, don't go." I honestly believe she might not have gone through with it if her friend had reacted that way. Instead, her best friend said, "Oh, is he attractive? Go for it. Have fun." It's incredibly frustrating. This conversation happened 6 months ago, and a few days later, she told her friend that after dinner, she went to his place and had multiple explicit encounters. Reading that made me physically ill. I went through a breakdown, vomiting in the toilet, and then crying on the bathroom floor. I simply couldn't fathom that this had actually happened, but it did. How could she do this? As the days passed and the initial shock began to subside, I started connecting the pieces. At the funeral, I noticed something unusual. Her best friend was talking to one of her co-workers. This friend from high school had no reason to know any of her co-workers, yet she was indeed chatting with the co-worker with whom my wife had the affair. Later, she came over and talked to me, giving me a hug. The man my wife had the affair with came and shook my hand. There's something about that makes me sick, like I was being humiliated during a moment of grief. Both of them, her best friend who knew about the affair and the coworker, were there. I couldn't help but wonder if her coworkers also knew. It's been a month, and I haven't made any progress in recovering from the heartbreak. I miss her terribly, and I wish she were still alive. If she were, I might even want to repair our marriage, but she's gone. I still can't bring myself to read all of her text messages with him. There are hundreds, and some are explicit. My blood boils, my heart aches, and anxiety rushes over me when I open their texts. My palms get sweaty, and my hands shake. But I feel it's important to know everything. It breaks my heart that this guy did things with my wife that she wouldn't do with me. What astounds me the most is that there were absolutely no warning signs, not a single one. Our marriage appeared to be in good shape. She never acted suspiciously, and our bed life continued as usual. There were zero indications, except for the fact that she started wearing a bit more makeup than usual. Then I blame myself for not catching on. Perhaps all of this could have been prevented. Maybe I should have done things differently. I'm shattered and can't see a path to happiness in my future. I received a response from her friend, apologizing deeply for encouraging the behavior and not considering my feelings. She expressed remorse and all that. Honestly, her apologies don't bring me any relief. As for the phone, I can't bring myself to erase all the evidence. I feel like I must go through my wife's entire text conversations with this man, or I'll forever wonder what did and didn't happen, how often, and maybe get some answers about their relationship. Obviously, in my state of trauma, I can't emotionally handle reading their conversations right now. But I've decided to keep the phone, read it all, and then get rid of it to move on. To those telling me to disrespect her memory or saying this is karma, please refrain from commenting. I loved her for over a decade, and my love for her isn't vanishing just like that. Despite the terrible things she did, she was still my wife, a daughter, and an aunt. She didn't deserve to be hit by a drunk driver and suffer a brain injury that ultimately caused her death. Please, I don't need these comments, and I'm not twisted enough to entertain such thoughts. To everyone else, thank you so much. Regarding AP, it appears that he was and still is single. I've already informed her friend about what happened. At first, she expressed sympathy and apologized for her role in it, but then she mentioned that I shouldn't ruin her reputation by telling others. I explained that I'm only sharing this with her because I know she encouraged my wife, but she hasn't replied yet. It's only been a day, and I'm not sure how anyone would react to such news. Update. I can't say that anything has improved, especially during this epidemic when I'm stuck not working and have too much time on my hands. Some people suggested reaching out to my wife's company's HR about her coworker with whom she had an affair. He is single. I did this and inquired about it. They mentioned that there was no company policy against coworkers engaging in romantic relationships as long as it didn't happen during work hours. I kind of suspected this would be the case. As much as I wanted to get him fired and ruin his life, it was indeed consensual, and their affair occurred off the clock. So I understand that there's nothing they can do, as I didn't expect otherwise. I sent a screenshot of the message in which her friend encouraged her to her boyfriend on Facebook. He replied, expressing sympathy for what happened to me, but he mentioned that she didn't think my wife would actually go through with it. He also stated that I shouldn't blame his girlfriend for my wife's affair or death. So I guess it's a dead end there, as I'm talking to someone who believes whatever his girlfriend says. I received numerous suggestions to share her texts and messages publicly to expose what she did. I want to make it clear that I will not do this, and I honestly don't see the point in doing so. She's no longer here, and there are no consequences left for her to face, no justice to be served. She's gone, and sharing this information would only make things harder for her family. Besides, it's really not anyone else's business, even if she were still alive. So I made the decision to go through all her texts with him and her other friends. I had initially planned to wait longer before doing this, but I just couldn't sleep. I couldn't move on without answers to questions like how, where, and why this happened. I found their entire conversation still there, from their first to their last texts. A bit of good news is that she eventually expressed guilt, though not right away, about the affair. After their second encounter for closeness, she told him she couldn't continue seeing him. However, their conversations were all over the place, ranging from her being very close to him, sending heartfelt messages, to completely ignoring him at times. She would sometimes apologize for ignoring him, which understandably upset me. The bad news is that she seemed to be much more adventurous with him. She even smoked MJ with him, something I had never seen her do. I discovered that they did spicy things multiple times, something she never allowed me to do. She also had him sleep in our bed on the night I went to visit my brother. Furthermore, she did BJ on him while he was driving to get lunch on their lunch break, and she talked about it like it was funny. This was something I wasn't prepared for, and it triggered a severe anxiety attack. I ended up drinking last night because it was all too overwhelming. I feel like he took her away from me, like he played a role in her death because she might still be alive if she hadn't gone to his place. I've become obsessed with the dates of their meetings, going back to my social media and camera album to see what day those encounters happened. It broke my heart when I realized they met on our anniversary, a day when I had taken her to the first place we went on a date. I remembered that day as something very special and romantic, and we were both so happy and close. Knowing she had closeness with another man just hours before our date makes me feel sick, and I don't see how I can ever get over this. My mind is still numb from what I read last night, and I deeply regret discovering this. I would have preferred not knowing the truth, even if it meant living with a lie. But now that I know, I must let go of all the love I had for her. I'm grieving her death, and I miss her terribly, but it's time for me to realize that she isn't the person I thought she was. I've read everything there is to know, and I don't think I can hurt any more than I'm hurting right now. Here's to hoping for healing. I have an appointment with a psychologist in about a month, but if I feel any worse, I'll go to the hospital. I know it's not a logical feeling, but I must continue on. I don't think you fully understand that I didn't discover her infidelity during her funeral, let alone knowing it was him. My emotions are a mix of extreme anger and deep hurt. I feel more hurt than angry, and I'm drained of the strength and energy required to be angry. This whole situation has left me feeling exhausted and depressed. The way I've been feeling, especially after finding out, can be described as feeling physically sick, with a constant nausea in my stomach and a sense of fear and hurt in my chest. I haven't started feeling better yet, but I'm starting to become more numb to it.